Okay, everyone, I believe it's 6 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to call this meeting of Budget and Finance Committee to order. The first thing that we will need is a motion and a second to conduct this meeting virtually on the internet.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I so move that we adopt this virtual tonight. So this can go on in there.
Have a motion by Mr. Ford and I believe a second by Mr. Harsh. Call the roll on this, please.
Dwight Jewell,
Yes.
Jerry Ford,
Yes,
Rachel Jones is absent. Ken Buckmaster,
Yes.
Shane Burton,
Yes.
Gary Clarity,
yeah,
Bill Ferguson,
Yes.
Bubba Gregory is absent. Landon Gully,
Yes.
Richard Harsh,
Yes.
Linda Sue Johnson,
Yes.
and Gary Walsh.
Yes.
10 yeses, 2 absent.
Mr. Gregory did call me and tell me that he wasn't going to be able to make it tonight, and appreciate the good turnout, good number here. Try to get through this the best we can. Will that roll call, you think, suffice for our roll call for attendance? Or do we need to do a separate roll call for attendance? Okay, I believe we'll let that suffice for roll call for attendance as well. We'll note the others that are not on the committee that are also in attendance. First item of business is to review the minutes from the November 16th, 2020 meeting. A few corrections that I've noted. I believe Mr. Clarity, Commissioner Clarity was in attendance. He's not listed as being present. And we had in others present, Commissioner Richard Johnson is listed as Commissioner Robert Johnson. Are there any other corrections, additions, or deletions to the minutes? Any other corrections?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
make a motion to approve the minutes as have been corrected.
Okay, we have a motion,
I'll second.
and the second was from, who was it from?
Mr.
Let's see.
Mr. Clarity.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion by Mr. Ford and a second, Mr. Clarity, approve the minutes from the November 16th meeting.
Dwight Jewell,
Yes.
Jerry Ford,
Yes,
Ken Buckmaster,
Yes.
Shane Burton,
Yes.
Gary Clarity,
yes,
Bill Ferguson,
Yes.
Landon Gully,
Yes.
Richard Harsh,
Yes.
Linda Johnson,
Yes.
Gary Walsh.
Yes.
10 yes.
The motion is approved. Next item of business is to go into the county reports, the financial summary, and the county trustees report. County trustees summary. If you look at year-to-date and your ending balances, and going over these, I won't read through all of these. I saw nothing of any consequence or that just jumped out at us. Mayor, did you have anything that you needed to comment on or Question?
No, sir, outside the usual, just keep in mind, this is cash balance, not actual fund balance. That was a change as we get closer to the year, but outside of that, you can see they're up pretty much over the beginning of the fiscal year. Just that one caveat about it's just cash balance.
Any questions on the trustees report? Hearing none, we'll move on to the summary financial statement as of December, the end of December. This gets us mid-year. So our numbers that we're looking at are 50% of budget. And starting off with the 101 general fund under our current property tax revenues, it looks like we've brought in 71% or $1,994,202. Last year, same time, we were at 1,878,000. So it doesn't seem that the county revenues on property taxes is substantially lower than it was last year pre-COVID. So I felt like that was good to note. Going down the list in the 101, everything seems to be about as it should be. If there's anything that you have questions about, please bring them out on our 101 fund.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I don't have a question, but I would make a comment on the local option sales tax. I know a lot of these counties are getting hit hard by it, but we're not. It's like we're actually quite a bit to the good on it. And I think that's because we don't have to rely on motels and bars and what have you to keep us going.
Yes, sir, Mr. Ford. I was going to bring that up. Our sales tax collection for November sales or our December receipts was actually $11,312 over what it was last December. So there again, we're still trending in the positive. And I think year to date, we're $54,434 over last year at the same time. It's December, end of December last year. Now that is county and school funds. That's total. That's total. I didn't separate them out, but you can do the math. It's roughly half. But that's gives us some idea that I think Mr. Ford's very, very correct in his observation that we are in a lot better position than a lot of the counties, particularly when it comes to our revenue stream right now. Any questions on the 101 general fund?
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, we had a technical difficulty here at the courthouse. We kind of lost the feed for a little bit. We're just now coming back on. It says the connection's unstable, but we should be back on. I think they were calling for any questions on the 101 as far as is it revenue, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Okay.
Total, our revenues are 73.3% of our budgeted amount. We're standing at year-to-date $4,277,488, which there again is about where we were, actually a little bit ahead, I believe, of where we were last year, same time. If we have no more comments, questions on the revenue, we'll move into expenditures. 101 expenditures, looking at your 50% benchmark, most things are below it, at it. Nothing that seems abnormally high, a little bit high on county coroner. Some of that will be, I think, reimbursed. Is that correct, Mayor?
Yes.
Yes, sir. And that'll actually be, I think, one of the budget amendment items later is the basically appropriating revenue that's received as reimbursements from Core Civic.
Several of these accounts are showing at 100%. Don't panic at that. That's because they're paid one time a year and they have been paid. That's why they're reflecting 100%. Overall, our total expenditures were at 45.9% of our budgeted amount in the 101 general fund. Any questions on any of those expenditures? Okay. Our 111 urban services, there again, current property tax is at 62%. Last year, same time, we were at 55%. So we're doing pretty good, I think, on our property tax collections, considering this is supposed to be such a down year for us. Overall, our revenues are at 58%, which they typically are after your influx of your property tax. Everything else looks in line so far as I can tell. Any questions on it, comments? Okay, moving into expenditures on 111. There again, we're showing 54% on expenditures. It's a little bit over, and I think that was some of those large purchases like patrol cars and things of that nature that got bought in that first half. That should even out as we go into the future. Any questions on it? Comments? It's not just my meeting, it's your meeting too. 116 solid waste, I think is about where typically it would be. Ambulance service fund, same thing. 118, any questions on either one of those? CCA's pass through, county drug fund. A lot of it will go out toward the end of the year. Kind of a restricted fund. Highway fund, it's looking good. They're way under 50 on both sides. Revenues is subject to what comes in from the state. Any questions on the highway fund? 131. Debt service, the 151. Everything looks in line. We've made final payment on several things, some patrol cars we made final payment on, and a roll-off that we had bought, we made final payment on it. So a lot of that debt's taking care of itself just by normal attrition. Any questions?
I have one question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
You asked about this sometime back. Are we on line to try to pay any of this debt off this year?
Possibly. Mayor?
I believe in there, the patrol cars and that solid waste runoff number 2, that'll be paid off this year.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
could next month, could we get a list of everything that's owed and how much is owed on it?
Sure we can. We did one at the first of the year. Amy, is that a big problem to try to update that?
No, there's really not much updating to that particular schedule. But I will send that out again.
Would appreciate it. That do you?
Yes,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
can I ask to have added to that when our payments are, how much they are, and how much is left over?
Okay, so you want to reflect what the total indebtedness is, what the payment is.
Correct.
That is what that debt schedule showed, sir.
That's what it's always had on it, so far as I remember. I don't have it in front of me, I'm sorry.
Does it show at what rate each one of those are at?
Yeah.
It does.
it
The
does.
only ones that doesn't show the exact rate that we're paying right now are the two variables, the Justice Center and the EESI. And I just wrote those checks a couple of weeks ago. We're paying below 1% on both of those.
Wow, nice. Okay.
Right now, because of the economy and debt is as cheap as it's ever been, ever going to probably be. I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen into the future, but it's actually probably staying below what your cost of living increases are. So it's like, I know no money's free, but it's almost like having free money. So, but it's always good to put ourselves in a better position if we have extra funds to try to pay off debt as we can. I think that's what we all try to do in our personal lives, and certainly that's what we want to try to do with the business of government if we see that we can. And it's been hard to do this year, not because the money wasn't there, but because the uncertainties of how COVID was going to affect our revenue streams and even our expenses. And we still, I think we've fared very well. That's very obvious that we're doing a good job with it, and it hasn't affected us as much as maybe others. But it's worth looking at and trying to see if it's something that we can eliminate. Certainly, I think we would all be in favor of doing that. Any other question on the 151 on the debt service fund? Education fund, there again, I think we're at 40, wheel tax is a little under 46.7%.
That does run a month behind.
Yeah, last year, same time, we were at 43.8. So actually we're in better position on it this year than we were last year. So I have no concerns about it. Okay. That takes care of our financial summaries. If there's not any other questions, I would entertain a motion to approve the trustees report and the financial summary report for December.
Move to approve.
Have a motion by Mr. Harsh and a second by Mr. Ferguson. Miss Amy?
Dwight Jewell,
Yes.
Jerry Ford,
Yes,
Ken Buckmaster,
Yes.
Shane Burton,
Yes.
Gary Clarity,
Yes.
Bill Ferguson,
Yes.
Landon Gully. Did you nod your head? I didn't see.
Yes. Can you not hear me?
Amen.
I guess you stayed muted. Richard Harsh,
Yes.
Linda Johnson,
Yes.
Gary Walsh,
Yes.
10 yeses.
Okay, that is done. We have several budget amendments for this this month. I believe all of these we can approve with one vote. So let's go over them. We'll go over each one, and then unless there's a problem with it, then we can just approve them on a singular vote. Is that correct, Mayor, Amy?
Yes.
Okay. All right, the first one is 2021-101-11R is animal shelter. This is from their reserve funds. They're going to put in a new heating system in the animal shelter, $4,500. Any questions about it?
Mr. Jewell,
Yes, sir.
is that building currently under HVAC?
It is actually under a very old, I think, used oil heating system. And I can't answer if there's actual air conditioning or not in there. I want to say there's maybe a window unit.
I think there's an old window unit through the wall, if I'm remembering correctly, and they were having problems with it. It wouldn't handle capacity. And that was one of the reasons, one of the things that they have most requested is to try to make the environment in there a little bit more stable. Any other questions on that one? Okay. Next one is 2021-101-12, medical examiner autopsy services, 5,525. Mayor, I think you wanted to speak to this one a bit.
Yes, sir. This is reimbursement from autopsies done to core civic inmates. They're reimbursing us for, I can't remember how many inmates it is. I think it's about 1,800 or so, 1,900 or so per inmate. So they're just reimbursing us for the cost of those. And this is just the allocation of that revenue coming into that line item for autopsy.
Okay. Any questions on it? Okay. Next one is BA 101-13. This is a expenditure or request on CARES Act grant funding from the Sheriff's Department to cover some deputy salaries and miscellaneous things, some
No,
printed.
no, this is the election. This isn't sheriff's.
Election office. I saw deputies and I went sheriff. I'm sorry. If I could read what I was reading, I could read it. Okay. Any questions on it? Thank you, Amy.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Do you have any idea where they got down other charges, what those would be, or what that covers?
If I remember correctly, it's meals for the poll workers on election days. I think there's also the PPE supplies for on election days. There's a lot in that particular, and there's also some miscellaneous charges.
There's also some cleaning, post election cleaning of like poll locations went into that as well.
Thank you. I forgot about that.
They had several things that the election this time they had to do because of COVID that they typically don't do, such as the cleaning and PPE supplies and things of this nature. And that's where they're recouping those things. And it's coming out of the CARES money. Anything else, Mr. Clarity? That answer your question?
No, I have no other questions.
Okay. Okay. Next one is, this is the Sheriff's Department one I was thinking about. There was a couple of patrol cars that were involved in some accidents, and this is the insurance recovery on that. I think a tree jumped out in the middle of the road and hit one of them, and a deer decided that it wanted to play tag with a patrol car. But this is a total of $7,421. It's money in, money out in the Sheriff's Department. Next one's BA 101-15. This is downtown grant, our part of for the downtown grant. Mayor, you need to speak to this at all to explain it.
Yes, sir. I'll go over that. The county has been accepted into the Department of Economic Community Development's Tennessee Downtowns program. That is to do downtown revitalization in rural communities. As part of that grant, we are receiving a $15,000, up to $15,000 reimbursable grant. The committee for that program, the local committee for that program voted to use that for facade improvements. That will be going through the county as there was not a 501c3 qualified to meet the requirements for ECD for accounting purposes. So that will be running through the county. Basically, we'll make sure that fund has sufficient funds there. It's basically just a bookkeeping expenditure to show when that 15,000 comes in, we've appropriated them the proper amount of funds there for a line item. So this is a 100% reimbursement from the state, and we expect to hopefully use the entire amount that comes in. And those applications should have been received by the property owners this week, and the application period closes on March 3rd. And the property owners can submit up to $3,000 for facade improvements to the outside of their building. It's windows, doors, lighting, those kind of things. And The grant was also written in such a way that if those funds are not used by the property owners, the county can use those to maybe do some street banners or those things along Main Street. So it was written pretty broadly. The state wants us to use all the funds. We want to use all the funds, but it's basically just the bookkeeping to make sure we show sufficient revenues and expenditures.
Any questions on it?
Is there a time limit on when this should be done?
I believe the time limit is sometime in the first 2 weeks of November is when they have to have the improvements done, and they have to submit, the property owners will have to submit their paperwork and checks where they paid their contractors to the county. It will go through our approval process to make sure we have all the documentation. We will then cut them a check and submit to the state to be reimbursed, and all that documentation will be submitted. It'll work kind of procedurally. It'll work for us to get reimbursed the same way as the landfill or the streetscape project.
Any other questions? Move on, BA 10116. This is Rescue Squad. A little bit of explanation. The per diem that they're paid on the call outs is paid typically in December. They didn't use as much money as was budgeted and don't anticipate to. They're wanting to move part of this unused line item to purchase equipment. Am I correct on that, Amy?
Yes, I cannot pronounce the word if Mayor would like to help me.
Is for extraction equipment, Jaws of Life. They had purchased one set and they want to purchase another.
Any questions on it? Okay. Next is BA 10117. This is new radios for emergency management. We're switching over, I think, to a digital system. Is that correct, Mr. Buckmaster and Amy? Is that what this is for, is upgrade on the radios?
Yes.
Okay. Any good enough explanation? Any questions? Okay. Next is BA 101-18. This is a request to amend the 101 fund with the fire department per diem, much like the same thing that the rescue squad. They didn't spend out as much money on calls as they thought they might, or it was in the budget, and they're wanting to move that money to purchase some additional equipment. Mr. Buckmaster, can you tell us what equipment they're planning to purchase? You don't know, don't want to say one way or the other?
I don't know, but I believe Chief Woodard's in the audience there at the courthouse.
I'm sorry, that's right, I forgot. Do you know what's planned to be used with that? Got no sound. Heard nothing.
We're working on it. Just give us a second. All right, let me try again.
Yes, sir. We're looking to update the air packs and face pieces that we have now to a minimum standard.
How many new air packs are we talking about?
Lost your sound again.
Purchasing about 23 or 24 face pieces for everybody to have their individual, so they won't have to share, especially with all this COVID going on.
Okay. I think we got that one. That answer your question? Any other questions on this one? All right. And we have BA 101-19. This is the wage study. I think this came out of Personnel Committee to do this. I think it came out to not exceed 18,000. I think the bid was somewhere at 16.8 or something like that. Is that correct? Mayor, would you like to address this?
The bid range given by the group that the Personnel Committee voted to recommend was about 15.5 or 15.8 up to about 18.5. And we are asking to do up to 20 to make sure that we have any overage. This is something we do for every expenditure. We budget over just to make sure we have it covered. But in the motion to approve this, the motion was only to hire BTA. It did not set a specific amount to be approved by the Budget and Finance.
Okay.
And again, just because it's in there as a expenditure doesn't mean that the entire fund will be expended. If there's nothing expended on it, the remaining will stay in the fund balance.
Typically, we try to put a little bit more than we think if there's any chance that it could run over. I think that's the reason that this amount is more than what came out of committee.
Well, there are some expenditures in there that were not, some possible expenditures in the quote that was not included because they're if there's something that was required that they didn't foresee, that would be an additional expenditure to the county. So we just want to make sure we budget a little bit over what they'd stated in their quote. We fully intend to cooperate in any way we can and try to minimize any expenditures, but we want to go ahead and make sure that we had it covered so we didn't have to come back and do a budget amendment later.
I understand.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
what is the purpose of this? Is this to define what other people are paying the employees? I don't understand where this is coming from. I thought Mr. Saleh was going to check with a bunch of people on this.
This is something we discussed during the budget hearings, that we wanted to do a wage study for the entirety of the county. It will compare us to, I think, 10 other communities. It'll be a lot of communities like us and then some communities surrounding us to see where we stand as far as wages. And this gentleman will come in, not only do wages for every position, he also do job descriptions and update job descriptions for every position. And the recommended wage scale they put in place will have graduated for scales for promotions and then whatnot. And that will be submitted as part of our personnel policy. So in the future, any raises are given, I hope through merit increases, anything through an annual review process by the department heads. And there will no longer be any issue about doing pay increases to the county commission other than cost of living adjustments, because this will include pay increases in there for if they go up the scale. It'll have it, if they're at this position, based on getting merit raises, I think for at least 3 different sections. And if they get a promotion, then they'll move up to the next part on the scale. So it'll be included in there. This is what a lot of, especially larger communities and cities do. And so we're hoping to move in that direction, and it's all spelled out right there on paper, what everything is.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Couldn't we have our HR department to do that instead of bringing someone in from out somewhere else and do it?
This is highly, highly, highly complicated. This was recommended to us by not only the CTAS, but also MTAS, and Midcomb and Human Resources also did the same thing. I'm on their board, and they hired another firm to do it. That firm actually did put in a quote, but they wanted $60,000 versus 15 to 18 for this gentleman. And this gentleman is actually currently doing one for Smith County. And Smith County submitted their paperwork to Ms. Howard to start doing this, and it is ungodly detailed. So no, our Human Resources Department wouldn't have the expertise nor the time to do this, because they are going very, very in depth and making sure we meet all kinds of different statutory requirements. And it's done on a very in-depth analysis. So we wouldn't have the expertise to do this.
So, Mayor, with his detailed analysis, we have studied this subject in the Personnel Committee for quite some time. The answers to the questions that we have will be answered due to this study that you're talking about right now. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It should cover every position through the county government and set out a detailed wage schedule for them by position. They will also create or update any existing job descriptions and create new job descriptions where there are none. So this will be very, very detailed, and that will be submitted along with any other suggested edits or amendments to our personnel policy. But we spoke to Mr. Beller. He's had experience doing this in Smith County. He highly recommended we go ahead, have the wage study done, and then submit that along with the personnel policy. But anything having to do with employee compensation as far as pay and whatnot should be addressed through this wage study.
Yeah, that's good, because I know during our last budget hearings, we talked about this, and I know Mr. Gully and I worked together on trying to come up with an idea that would best suit pay increases for employees. And Mr. Gregory, the commissioner, had mentioned that we were looking for merit-based pay, and we had asked for that in the past. And so at that moment in time, it was challenged to the personnel committee, which we didn't really have the ability to dig so deep as what we're talking about now, I do assume. And so this should give us the answers that we've been curious to know the answers to for some time.
As I said, we looked into trying to do it ourselves, and just the depth of experience and analysis and everything done in it, we wouldn't have the time, we wouldn't have the expertise. We reached out to CTAS and MTAS for some recommendations, and this BTA, Mr. Thompson, it's one of the groups that's been highly recommended. He's been retained by Smith County to do theirs, and so this should be very in-depth analysis and address all those issues having to do with employee compensation going forward, and that should take care of us. It'll need to be reviewed every so often, and that's something, once they get it all submitted, they're going to come to committee hearings and talk about how to update it, when to update it, and how to put it into effect.
Mr. Chairman, will this override the sheriff's department when we're giving raises on longevity? Will this take over?
I don't think so. I think that I don't know whether are they even going to be included in it, Mayor?
I believe all county personnel will be included in this, and as we go work with Mr. Thompson, those issues be addressed. But keep in mind, this is just going to be a recommendation to the county commission. Once it's submitted, it'll be up to the county commission to determine if you're going to put those increases in place. Are you going to do it phased in? How are you going to do it? And those will be issues that Mr. Thompson and his group will help us with once that the final report is submitted.
The main thing right now is to just get a baseline of how our salaries and what our positions are with job description and how they stack and rack with other counties. Are we paying less? Are we paying the same? Are we paying more? That's the main thing. Then the other will build off of that. If we see, we may come back and everything is just hunky-dory in line with everybody else, and we don't really need to do anything, but probably we're going to want to tweak it. We're going to want to establish a policy on how raises are going to be given and administered, and there may be some departments that are woefully underpaid that we may want to look at addressing, whether we do that at one time, a little bit at a time, all those things. We really can't even talk about it or make those decisions until we have those numbers in front of us.
Chairman Jewell,
Yes, sir.
will this have anything in coverage of the insurance? I should say there in this case, when we're looking at comparing what other counties may cover on insurance reimbursement to their employees, will it have anything to do with those insurance sides, or is that totally just wage?
You're talking about benefits itself or just wage? Mayor?
I believe it is only just the wages. It does not take into account any other benefits, but I think that's what it is. If I'm incorrect, I'll go back and look at the quote or the proposal that was submitted, but my recollection at this point is it was just for the wages.
Any other questions? Mr. Ferguson, you're muted.
I think Mr. Gully brings up a good point, because we're not just talking about wages. We're talking about compensation in general, which is the entire package. And so when he talks about benefits, he's talking about not just wages. He's talking about the entire scope of what the employee's benefits are. So I think the question needs to be asked. We're talking about wages. We're also talking about benefits, because at the end of the day, it's all compensation, which is all part of the package. So I think that question needs to be asked. I think that's a good point by Commissioner Gully.
don't think that would be that big an issue if you're canvassing 10 counties. I'm assuming that their benefits would be pretty universal across all their departments, you would think. They should be able to tell you, we give 10 vacation days, and, so you're not having to actually answer that question on each position as much you would answer, I would think, through the entity that you're asking the questions of.
Now, the 10 counties that are in question here, are these 10 counties that are similar to ourselves?
There'll be some counties that are similar to us, and then some will be the surrounding counties.
It's a mixture, trying to do the surrounding and also the ones that are in the same size categories.
Now, that makes sense to me because the surrounding counties are the ones we compete against. So we have to know what they're doing as well. I agree.
Any other questions about it? Okay. 151 debt service, the roof project, can that be included in this, Amy, or does it need to be a separate vote?
I believe it can be included.
Okay. On it is just where the school board is making the first payment on the roof project. You're paying the money into us so that we can pay it out later on. It's receiving of the funds from the school board, $117,196. You've heard all the budget amendments. Are there any questions on any of them before we bring them to a vote? If you need to pull one of them out, we'll be glad to vote on it separately, or we can do them all in one motion. Hearing no questions, I'll call for a motion. Everyone's bashful tonight.
Move to approve them all in one motion.
Mr. Harsh makes the motion to approve all of the budget amendments. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Ms. Johnson. Was that you? I heard a female voice. I think it was.
Yes.
Okay. Johnson, I believe she beat you just by half a second there, Gary. I'm sorry. We have a motion to approve all the budget amendments. Okay, and a second by Ms. Johnson. Mr. Harsh and Ms. Johnson make the motion. Please call a roll.
Dwight Jewell,
Yes.
Jerry Ford,
Abstain.
Ken Buckmaster,
Abstain.
Shane Burton,
Yes.
Gary Clarity,
No.
Bill Ferguson,
Yes.
Landon Gully,
Yes.
Richard Harsh,
Yes.
Linda Johnson,
Yes.
Gary Walsh.
Yes.
7 yes, 1 no, 2 abstain.
Motion does carry. We will send those forward to the full body next week. Were there any other discussion items? Mayor, did you have anything else?
No, sir.
Any of the commissioners have anything else?
Chairman Jewell,
Yes, sir.
in terms of those abstain votes, do those count as no's or just not count in this case?
They're basically the same as a no vote. You have to have a majority of yeses to approve it. The no's, the abstentions really don't matter. It's getting the number of required yes. Am I right on that, Mr. Beller? Did I explain that poorly? Mr. Beller, did I explain that correctly?
The abstentions are at no unless they've qualified it for that language for the conflict issues, then they're not counted in the total of the votes. So it's the no's, the abstains as they were stated are no votes.
You can abstain with cause. That's where you say, I abstain from this because it affects the department I work for, or it affects my family's income, some reason, but just a pure abstaining vote is the same as a no vote unless you clarify it or qualify it. All right. Any public comments? Anyone in the audience? Peanut gallery? Now, Mr. Walsh. Have a motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor? It's so indicated on my screen. We are adjourned. See you everyone in about 15 minutes at work session. Thank you. You will have to sign out and sign back in on work session.
Good motion.